On today's show, Juraj Slafkovsky is popping off and breaking franchise records. We'll also look at Wyatt Johnston's great start. All that coming up on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalikesh, Director of North American Scouting for Dobber Prospects, joined by Sebastian High, Director of European Scouting for Dobber Prospects and Head Scout of the team. And we'll be looking at some sophomores doing great this season in the NHL. We'll start off with our first segment. A big name in Juraj Slafkovsky, the recent first overall pick of the 2022 NHL draft, is breaking franchise records this season with the Montreal Canadiens. We'll look at which franchise records he's broken and what he's been doing this season. In our second segment, we'll look at Wyatt Johnston of the Dallas Stars. Why did he slip in the NHL draft? And we'll talk about his performances this season, what happened on that side. And then in our final segment, we'll be looking at some more sophomore players around the NHL, including Dylan Guenther, Mason McTavish, and JJ Peterka. Before we get into any of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. If you are watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get things started right away with Juraj Slafkovsky. Listen, it's no secret, we're both Habs fans. We happen to do prospect stuff as well. We've been watching a lot of Habs hockey this season, and Juraj Slafkovsky is a different beast this year, isn't he?
He's playing like a first overall pick. I mean, after starting the year with like 7 points in his first 31 games, he's been at almost a point a game clip ever since being joined on that first line with Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield. And he has 10 points in his last 10 games. He's had 2 separate 9-game point streaks this season. And while there have been dry spells that have also been extended in terms of like 9-game pointless streaks, his overall play has come like miles in the past year. If you compare how Juraj Slafkovsky's been playing like for most of this season compared to like the beginning of even like the preseason this year or any of his D+1 tape, he's been taking huge strides.
Yeah, absolutely. We could talk about those strides really in detail and kind of break that down. Before, the franchise record he's broken is he scored the most points for a teenager in Habs history. He's exceeded Mario Tremblay, who did it back in, I believe, the 80s or 70s or 80s, something like that, where he put up 40 points before he turned 20. Slafkovsky has 41 points as a teenager and turned 20 literally a couple days ago as of recording this. So yeah, great stuff for Juraj Slafkovsky. He's been doing great this season with the Habs, and it all really goes through the improved scanning habits and decision-making in this game. There's been a huge step forward in that. Since this draft year, it's been clear that Juraj Slafkovsky is a playmaker. The goals that he scored at the World Juniors or at the Olympics or at the Men's Worlds and all that good stuff, it's great to score goals. It just wasn't a reflection of what actually makes his game tick, and it's his ability to connect plays in really smart, projectable ways, take pucks off the boards, find a teammate in the slot, and kind of cycle pucks really well in the offensive zone. And that's been really clear for the Habs this year. And I think the big part of that is that combination of skills with Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield on that first line. Is that right?
For sure. It's been a really good fit for him stylistically. He's had a very specific niche and a very specific role on that line that is very attuned to his strengths. He's allowed to kind of just be the power forward, the guy that you send into the corner to win a puck battle. And he's been winning puck battles at an incredibly consistent rate, especially for a 19-year-old for the most of the season. And he's had that specific role, but also playing with 2 players like Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki, who have also both rounded out their games in terms of being real dual threats in terms of the playmaking and the goal scoring, has allowed Slafkovsky to work on both of those aspects of his game. He's really been able to shine as a playmaker. He's really been able to show why the playmaking was lauded as his best offensive tool apart from the physicality in his draft year. And on top of that, he's added 15 goals. And I believe he sits like fourth on the team in points behind Caulfield, Suzuki, and Matheson, and third in goals. So he's very much implicated with the Habs. And while it's not necessarily the strongest team this year, he is very much looking like a first overall pick and is making a consistent difference on a nightly basis. And it's been remarkably consistent going back to December.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the big step up with Slafkovsky has been the power play game. He's kind of I put out a whole video on that on my personal YouTube channel where I broke down the way that Juraj Slafkovsky revolutionized the Habs power play. And just to sum it up, he's become a legitimate passing option on zone entries, which was the Habs' biggest issue on the power play. They could not get set up in the offensive zone to save their life. Slafkovsky being on that right flank, ready to receive a pass from Nick Suzuki on zone entries, has changed the way and the approach to the offensive game on zone entries on the power play completely for the Habs. In the offensive zone, once he gets set up, he's constantly moving off the puck. He's really, I think, one of the best in the NHL already at retrieving pucks and corners off shots on the power play. Like, that's become a legitimate strength in Slafkovsky's game. Is if you shoot a puck and it rims towards his side, he's getting it. He's corralling that puck and cycling it up and extending offensive zone possessions. That was another issue with the Habs power plays. The moment they shot the puck, it was out. It was out of the zone immediately. So that's been a big progress in Montreal's ability to kind of create offense. And yeah, although, there's going to be, I'm pretty sure inevitably there's going to be some power play merchant arguments towards Slafkovsky. You don't get on the top power play and play that well without being a good player. It's not just a matter of being a power play merchant. Slafkovsky's doing all the right things and has actually turned the Habs power play into a weapon. It has gone dry as of late, but it's by no fault of Slafkovsky's. He's doing really the most that he can do on that power play in that situation. And Mike Matheson has started passing to him, which is great, right?
Useful, yeah.
Absolutely. But yeah, overall, I think that, the projection with Slafkovsky hasn't changed. I think this was what we both expected him to become. I just don't think either one of us expected this to happen this soon, right?
I mean, I think it's more just following the trend. You expect it to be relatively linear for the most part. I mean, of course, it's always different with different players and how you develop them, but the expectation was not from him to go from a bit part bottom six winger to a quite clearly impactful top line winger in the span of 3 months. Like, it was a real like massive jump in his effectiveness, in the pace he's been able to pull off high end plays with, like that on top of the scanning habits. I've been really impressed with the pace in his game, the pace of the decision making. He's not hanging on to pucks for too long. He's using his handling ability to create just enough space to make a play rather than handling the puck for flashy sake, right? Like, he's very purposeful with every single thing that he does. And on top of that, I think that he's been relatively impactful defensively as well. He's using his reach to shepherd play towards the boards, and obviously his in-zone defensive habits can still mature a decent amount, and they will over the next couple of years. But there's also been a significant jump in defensive output for him this season. So just been overall a real progression in Slafkovsky's game. And I think a lot of people that were complaining about that first overall pick have gotten a bit quiet since then. And I mean, I know the two of us would not have picked Slafkovsky at number one, but at least at this point in time, it would be a tough argument to make to pick anyone else at this stage, no?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say both of us had him second and third overall, I think, respectively, in our draft lists.
Neither of us had him second. We had Frank Mazar second. Yeah,
that's right. I had him third. I remember he being a bit lower on him.
Sixth. It was a bit low. It was a little bit low. Yeah,
and I understand it because he wasn't playing in a way that really manifested his strength. Like we said, like the goals he scored in the Olympics, at the World Juniors, all that stuff. I mean, he had 7 goals and 0 assists at the Olympics, which isn't his game at all. And now we're seeing a bit more of what Slafkovsky can do. And one of the great things about him, especially as I mentioned on the power play, is a circulation. He's passing pucks quickly. He's moving into pockets, playing give and goes. He's circulating the puck. He's being the focal point of circulation, which for a 19-year-old in the NHL is extremely rare. And also to keep in mind, bigger players usually take longer to develop. This has been something we've studied for a while at Dobber Prospect. It goes back to before I even joined Dobber Prospects. We've studied kind of the development length, the time that a player takes to hit their prime offensively. And if you're above 6'3" or below 5'9", it usually takes 4 to 5 years to develop into a bona fide NHLer and hit your ceiling. We haven't seen the start of what Slafkovsky can be. But that wraps things up for today.
He's 240 pounds.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. He's huge. But that wraps things up for our first segment. We'll talk about Wyatt Johnston coming up. We'll talk about why he slipped in the 2021 NHL draft, and we'll also talk about what comes next for him, what kind of teammates he's going to be playing with moving forward in Dallas. We'll get into all of that after these messages from our sponsors at Game Time. If you're looking to buy cheap tickets last minute to any event, Game Time is the best place to get that done. I'm someone whose schedule changes a lot. I can find myself with an afternoon free out of nowhere, and Game Time has come in clutch when it comes to buying tickets last minute to any event. It's not just sports, comedy, theater, whatever requires tickets, Game Time has you covered. I especially like their last minute deals. You can save up to 60% by buying last minute for sports, concert, comedy, theater, or anything else that you wish to buy tickets for. They've got a bunch of other deals to help you save money, flash deals, zone deals, a bunch of stuff there, and the lowest price guarantee means that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a ticket that's cheaper in the same section and row than what Game Time has to offer. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. It's really easy. You just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, really simple. Just create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Alrighty, so moving on to Wyatt Johnston, a revelation since last year in the NHL. He was picked in the 20s by Dallas in a year that, let's be honest, a lot of us had very little clue of what was going on the OHL side, or just the CHL side in general. Very, very little games were played. So it was really difficult to get a grasp on these prospects, see where they're at in their development, see what they're good at, see what they're weak at, and what they need to work on. So heading into that draft class, there were a lot of OHLers that could have gone higher than they did, but I don't think anyone encapsulates that as much as Wyatt Johnston, right?
Oh yeah, he's the big outlier in terms of the takeaway of the lack of game tape in that year.
Yeah.
Like he was perhaps in terms of the draft stock a little bit of a victim of also where he played for Team Canada. Basically the only hockey that he played that year was at the U18s for Team Canada. He was playing a third line checking role, and it was a dominant third line like checking line, and he put up 2 goals and 4 points in 7 games, but to extrapolate from that to like a player that now has 7 goals and 11 points in his last 10 NHL games in a matter of 2.5 years, that's a pretty big jump. But yeah, like the Dallas Stars are one of the better organizations in terms of amateur scouting in the NHL, and that 2021 draft class, we're going to talk about another gem they found that year a little bit later in this segment. But Wyatt Johnston has just been absolutely incredible. Like as a rookie, he put up 24 goals and 17 assists for 41 points, playing the full 82 games. And again, he's not missed a single game this season and has put up 29 goals and 59 points in 75 games. The progression in his play has been really impressive, and he's been able to combine a high level of intelligence with really deceptive skill, and his maturity, especially in both directions, defensively and offensively, as a 20-year-old who only turns 21 in like a month's time, has been very impressive.
Beyond that, for me, it's just there were shifts I saw where he played with Logan Stankoven this year. I was like, wait, hold on, he's keeping up with Logan Stankoven energy level wise, which is not an easy feat. Logan Stankoven is one of the most energetic players you'll ever watch, and those two were picked. They were if I'm not wrong, they were the first 2 picks of Dallas in that 2021 NHL draft. A draft class that wasn't really regarded as a class that was deep on talent. They managed to get out of this with 2 of the best picks of the draft in terms of pick for value. I mean, Wyatt Johnston on his own, like you mentioned, the intelligence, the skill, but for me, it's especially the mature habits and the energy that he brings. He can play any role on any line, and he'll uplift the players he's playing with. He can also be the central focus of his line when he needs to. He can be the pure skill element, the dynamic element, the goal scoring element, and the playmaking element. There are so many different hats that he can wear in an NHL lineup. I really did not see this from him in the tape that I saw at the U18 Worlds with Canada. This was not something I ever expected out of Wyatt Johnston, and he's really exceeded expectations. So full on hats off to Dallas for pulling this off. This is a great selection, and one that I didn't really believe in when he was picked, because again, I saw a middle 6 player at best.
Yeah.
His draft
I
year,
I remember it being regarded as a reach at the time, and I was like, "I gotta watch more of this guy." Like, he got picked so much earlier than I expected him to go, and,
yeah,
turns out the Dallas Stars can scout, so,
yeah.
yeah, it worked out for them.
Speaking of which, Logan Stankoven, who was picked 47th in that same year. Honestly, I remember on draft day after those picks were made, thinking, if you flip those around, I'm fine with it.
Yeah,
If you take Stankoven at
exactly.
21 and Johnston at 47th, I'm fine with it. But either way, the Stars got two of the best in this draft. I mean, Logan Stankoven is looking ridiculous. He's not a sophomore, so we won't go in depth on him. But I think the way that he plays fits so well with what Wyatt Johnston needs on his line. And yeah,
Yeah.
that was a Logan I thought should have gone in the first round. Really, really great value for the Dallas Stars. But yeah, how do you see them both playing out? Let's say within the next 3 or 4 years, do you see them ending up both as top liners or second liners? Do you see them playing together or being separate? What's your thoughts on this?
I've loved their chemistry together. I think I'll tackle that last part first. I think that them playing together had, at least from what I've caught so far of them with the Dallas Stars, they have often been like the most electric duo on that team, and that is a team filled with electric duos, right? Like
Yep.
there's a ton of chemistry in that top six and interchangeable. Like they have like basically three lines that they can run as like first lines when they want to, but
Yep.
the chemistry built between Johnston and Stankoven has already just been like pretty much like in competition with those other high end matchups. Like I'm thinking, like Joe Pavelski with anybody is basically among the best chemistries in the entire league, right? So,
Yep.
but yeah, like Stankoven and Johnston, as you mentioned, they can match each other's work rates. They're both highly intelligent. They both constantly shuffle everything towards the slot. They both really like to get to those gritty areas and score difficult goals. They're not afraid of discomfort in any way, shape, or form offensively, and
Yep.
they're also just so pacey, but also possession oriented. They're not going to waste away possession with a low danger shot attempt. They're going to hang on to its cycle, use their teammates, try to get themselves to the high danger areas, try to move off puck, find those soft spaces in the offensive zone, and I've really loved those two players together. And I mean, what's more fun than just like two players from the same draft class that like one who like everyone knew dropped from the beginning in Logan
Yeah.
Stankoven, and the other one that very clearly now should have been a top 10 pick, but hey, we had no game tape. But yeah, just an incredible storyline for those two young players, and the future for Dallas looks pretty good, and they're already a damn good team. So
Yeah.
they're pretty good.
Absolutely. Yeah, I that's one of the rare teams in the NHL that I look at and I'm like, oh, wow, I want to see what it's like being on the inside of that draft team, sitting at their draft table, kind of debating picks with them, seeing who they want, because like I'm sure there are just a bunch of brilliant minds in that organization sitting around that table when they're making picks. It's inevitable when you're making such great picks like this, and that's been kind of a trend moving forward. Like every single year, I'm really really impressed with what Dallas is doing, and this year is no exception. Great additions by Dallas in the 2021 NHL draft, and they're already paying off greatly. But that wraps things up for our second segment. We'll get into our third, where we go a bit broader. We'll discuss three players in Dylan Guenther, Mason McTavish, and JJ Peterka. We'll talk about their sophomore years this season, coming up after these messages from our sponsors here at FanDuel.
Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's right. That's 200 bucks that you can bet on anything from point spreads, money lines, single game parlays, and far more. I know I'm personally always a fan of single game parlays as they make every single game all the more exciting, especially when you're attending an event live. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets.
Alrighty, so moving on to our final segment, we'll be talking about three sophomore players that have been putting up great numbers. We'll start off with Dylan Guenther in Arizona. I don't feel like Arizona gets talked about enough, and it's been looking good on their end over the last few games. Their young players are performing really, really well. Logan Cooley's off on a tear recently. Clayton Keller's being Clayton Keller and doing Clayton Keller things, but Dylan Guenther's kind of in the mix there. I want to hear your thoughts on what Dylan Guenther's done this season. First, let's talk about the point totals this year, where he was picked, and how it's looking so far for Arizona.
For sure. So this season, Dylan Guenther's played 29 games in the AHL, where he's logged 10 goals and 28 points. And through 37 NHL games, he's logged 12 goals and 24 points. So the production has been quite solid all around at the professional level. He's also just 20 years old. He is turning 21 in a couple of days, in about a week's time. But he's a 6'2", 174-pound right shot winger. He can play on both sides, and he was picked 9th overall in that 2021 NHL draft, the same draft as Wyatt Johnston. That was definitely affected by the lack of game tape and COVID. But he's been playing some excellent hockey, especially in this recent stretch. He has 4 goals and 7 points in his last 10 games. Whenever I tune into an Arizona Coyotes game, he is quite clearly the biggest shooting threat already in that lineup. Every single shot he gets off is an incredibly quick, accurate, and heavy release. And that is also his biggest tool in the offensive zone. He has a wicked shot, and he can get it off from just about anywhere. And it's quite versatile as well as a release, whether it's a wrist shot, a snapshot, a one-timer. He can do it all, basically, in terms of the shooting toolkit. And the pace with which he's been able to get that shot off has progressed a lot since his draft year, and has certainly helped him translate that goal scoring to the NHL level.
For sure. I think that that's a big part of what's going to be his ticket moving forward. By the way, Dylan Guenther was part of the Oliver Ekman-Larsson trade to Vancouver. That was a pick that Vancouver gave up in the trade in return. A weird trade at the moment, and still in hindsight looks a bit weird, but either way, Vancouver's back on track, so who are we to complain? It's been looking real good on their end. But yeah, Dylan Guenther's been looking really, really good. And you mentioned the versatility of shot. I fully agree. One thing, though, that really stands out for me is the shot in motion. He's not a player that needs to dust off a puck. He's not a player that needs to stop skating to shoot a puck. It's all very fluid. It's all within the motion, and everything works together to put that release together. And I feel like moving forward, having Dylan Guenther on your half wall on one side and Logan Cooley on the other to dish pucks, like that's a recipe for success. It's going to be looking really, really good in a couple of years for Arizona. Right now, they're still in the lottery section of the draft, between kind of 6 and 8, oscillating in that range with the Canadiens, with the Senators, that kind of range of guys. But yeah, I think moving forward, we're going to see Dylan Guenther, Logan Cooley, those guys really take that team by storm. And with Clayton Keller giving a bit more experience, a bit more background, like that'd be a good first line, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. I mean, Arizona's definitely been collecting a lot of assets, and they've been also taking some very interesting swings at the draft recently. But I'm very curious to see how it all comes together for that organization.
For sure. I think that the combo of average size or small guys, small size skill guys, combined with the big boys have been having in recent years. I
Many
mean,
big boys.
Dmitry Simishev, Daniil Boot. I think every single one of their picks in the 2023 draft. Well, yeah, like I think like every single one of their picks in the 2023 draft was like above 6'2" or something like that. Like
There's one exception, I think, but it was like overwhelmingly large.
Yeah, like it was a big boy draft. And yeah, I feel like we're going to probably see a bit of the same this year. If Arizona ends up with a lottery pick at second or third, you can bet all your money they're taking Anton Stalayev. That's absolutely the guy they're going for. But yeah, other than Dylan Guenther, let's move on to Mason McTavish. He's been having a really, really good sophomore year. Yeah, he's another player that it was available for the 2021 NHL draft, and because of COVID, had to go overseas in the league that's less well known, so he didn't get as much exposure. But he still ended up getting picked at third overall, and it was a great piece of work by the Anaheim Ducks with their scouting research there, making sure that they invested the right amount of time in order to kind of develop. They invested the right amount of time in scouting Mason McTavish in order to kind of hone in on what his upside was. I wasn't sold at all in his draft year. I saw a really slow player who needed a lot of work on his skating just to get up to par. But yeah, I remember having him. I had him ranked like in between the 15 and 17 range. But yeah, he got picked third, and I raised my eyebrows and thought, oh goodness, this is going to look ridiculous for me in a couple years. And it has. It's been great this season, eh?
He's been excellent. I mean, he has 18 goals and 41 points through 63 games, which has not been easy on this Anaheim Ducks roster. The last 10 games has certainly been a dry spell with only a single goal to show for in the last 10 for him. But it's also been a 12-game stretch where the Anaheim Ducks have won a single game, lost 9 games. Oh no, 10 games in regulation and scored a total of 12 goals. So goals are hard to come by right now for Anaheim.
Yeah.
But McTavish has progressed very well. He is a physical, two-way, and highly intelligent center who plays with a ton of grit and snarl in his game and has a wicked release, especially from the bumper position on the power play. His snapshot is one of the better ones in his age group. And he's been progressing great for Anaheim. But I was with you. Like in his draft year, I had some questions, especially regarding skating ability, but he progressed quite well on that as a D+1 playing in the OHL. But he's had a very interesting development trend with Anaheim and certainly fits the mold of what that organization values. I mean, they've doubled down on intelligent, big centers over the years now, adding Leo Carlson and Cutter Godestay to the mix. So he's just one of many pieces, but definitely a stalwart in Anaheim's long-term projected top 6 and quite possibly even top line.
Yeah, for sure. I think that moving forward, there's a lot of opportunities in Anaheim to build great chemistry with the young players that they've added and that they already have. There's so many combination of skills you can put together to make different lines that all work really, really well. But last but not least, let's talk about JJ Peterka because he's been looking ridiculously good for Buffalo recently, right?
Oh yeah, he's been excellent. I mean, he has 5 goals in his last 5 games and 6 goals and 8 points in his last 10. So the production is just very impressive. He's up to 26 goals on the season, adding to that 20 assists for 46 points through 75 games, and has just been a real consistent presence in Buffalo's top 6. A couple of games outside that top 6 this season, certainly, but for the most part, he's a very consistent presence with their biggest offensive talents, and he has been playing some just excellent hockey, especially since Casey Middlestat was also leading the team in points at the time of his trade to Colorado, but Peterka is right there in the mix for the top point scorers on that team, just 6 points back of the team lead. So he's right in the mix, and it's been very much a score by committee this season in Buffalo. And I mean, they've been struggling to string together wins over the course of the year, but he's been really a revelation over the past 2 seasons because he had a pretty solid rookie year last year too, logging 12 goals and 32 points. But the jump in scoring rate has been really impressive.
For sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. He was a 2020 draft pick. Is that right?
Yeah, he was he was the 34th overall in 2020.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember I think he was the first scouting report I ever wrote. It was a scouting report I submitted to get hired at Dobber Prospects, and I remember seeing his game as a very projectable middle 6 game. I think that's still where he's headed, but he's heading more towards a second line role than a kind of middle 6 role. And I think it has to do with the increased creativity because I remember watching tape of his in the German Elite League when he was playing there in his draft year, and he looked very responsible, very mature already for an 18-year-old. He was playing well above his years in terms of the decisions he was making, the support he was giving his teammates. That was clear back then. It's still clear now.
The high motor.
I think the high motor was a big part of why I saw him as a bona fide, middle 6 guy, low floor, high ceiling type of guy. Low ceiling, high floor type of guy. That's how I described him in the scouting breakdown I gave back in 2020 to Dobber Prospects that got me hired. And yeah, I think that's still true to a certain extent, but the goal scoring game has improved a decent amount. He's gotten more creative, more inventive, more fluid. There are so many different facets of the game that he's added to his already existing toolkit of high intensity, high energy, really good awareness, really good defensive positioning, just looking like a great pickup for Buffalo. And Buffalo's pool is just ridiculous. The amount of guys they have it's something else, right?
They have 9 projected top 6 players. So we'll see where Peterka ends up at the end of the day. But it is a stacked pipeline.
For sure. But that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our next shows as we continue our prospects coverage for the month of April. This has been Hattie Kalikesh with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.